This is 0verture, the Prelude Podcast. Welcome to the Prelude Podcast. My name is Kris, and I'm a principal security researcher here at Prelude.
Hi, I'm Alex Manners. I'm a security engineer at Prelude.
So today on the podcast, we have a special guest, Penny, who's our COO of Prelude. Penny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, sure. Penny Tiglias here. So I'm COO here at Prelude, and I've spent my career in marketing management, doing business development and operations, primarily working in financial services and real estate companies. So as you'll learn through the chat, no sort of specific technical background, just having had the opportunity to work with different InfoSec teams and whatnot. So tangential work. And Prelude is my first exploration into cybersecurity.
So as we start off with every podcast with guests on the show, we always want to start off with a few questions just to kind of get the juices flowing. What security technology or concept outside of what we're currently doing do you want to see get better over the next year?
So honestly, this is just very personal. Like, I would love to learn more. And so it obviously sort of naturally flows into this, but it would be great if folks weren't so dismissive of people trying to enter the space who don't already have like a comp sci background or haven't already tried or done, the home lab setup and, gone above and beyond to learn solo. If the industry could be a bit more welcoming to, new folks trying to just append security to what they're doing or actually enter the space and, actually be at a company that does it would be fantastic. Just like personally, I'm trying to learn. So that would be great. And I know here we're trying to do some of that. And it's part of the original concept of what Prelude was doing, trying to bring folks into cybersecurity and fill the talent demand gap. That is the thing that we absolutely have to do. And I would love to see more of.
Penny, can you actually talk a little bit about what Prelude was before the work that we're doing now? Because I think that's important to this conversation, talking about technical hiring and your experiences, like bringing people in and some of the stories you've told me about how you were like literally helping people who like in some cases couldn't afford food or something. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I met Spencer Thompson, our founder and CEO, back at the end of 2017 when he started Prelude, and it was the Prelude Institute. And the mission was to solve the issue of not having enough cyber folks to do all the work that's needed, but also to help people who are underemployed or undereducated and give them a pathway into an entry-level role in cybersecurity. And we picked SOC analyst after sort of looking at what that role entailed and what the starting knowledge was. And so we thought we could train people in 6 months of full-time coursework with lots of hands-on experience to prepare them for that role, even having come off of no technical knowledge prior. So, some of the folks we were working with did everything from manual labor jobs to, driving a bus or, warehouse stocking. And we had a couple of folks who had backgrounds as like help desk analysts, just to see if there was that baseline knowledge sort of help them through our coursework. And so I was also part of our litmus test for this. I didn't officially go through the curriculum, but I was sort of the first gut check as our instructors were writing curriculum to say, could I even understand this? Or is there precursor information that you just need to explain? And is this exercise doable? And so I was hoping through that I could learn, but obviously just doing the job of actually running the school and, working with employers to then source roles for them, for the students once they graduated. I was a little distracted doing the work, but that was sort of the goal was to give folks that baseline of knowledge to start in cyber.
What would you say are some of the top lessons learned or big points that you came out of that process with?
I mean, just from the school perspective, obviously everybody learns very different, and like all the tooling we needed, there's such a range, and we had so much more we wanted to do pre-COVID hitting, and then us obviously focusing then on the tools we're building here. But part of it was like the culmination of the training was a mock SOC. So we were training them to be SOC analysts. So we had, a month of experience using tools like Splunk, for example, and what an alert looks like, and then how you go and use things like Wireshark and what you're researching and all that. And just doing training in general, there was a lot of learning there, right? So how you need to present information and the natural things of repetition and giving folks essentially like the bullet points and exercises they needed. But also the motivation that people need. So it was part of what we were looking for up front, like why you even wanted to enter the space. And if you like had that North Star and like if true motivation versus just, oh, this sounds pretty cool, or, I think I could do it. If you'll sort of work through that learning experience.
What was the success rate, or could you kind of define what success looked like coming out of it? And then what was the success rate out of that process?
I don't remember our stats exactly. So part of what you were alluding to before was, some of the other support work we were doing with like social services, for example. So like part of my role was to work with like Workforce Innovation Act and find grants to give folks like living stipends, for example, to go through this full-time program because they couldn't work while doing it. And so honestly, everybody went through the entire program who didn't otherwise have, let's say, a family emergency or something that otherwise required them to work and earn just a living in whatever else they were sort of doing prior. And then we learned a ton about what people were able to do at the end. So we placed some folks in sort of general IT roles, placed a few folks in SOCs. And what's been great is since they graduated, this would have been in October 2019, we've already seen some of our graduates get promoted or get other jobs. And it's been really exciting to see. And yeah, so I think our official numbers were an 83% graduation rate. And again, the folks who had to drop were not for lack of trying and whatnot, but it was sort of that surround support that they needed. And the average salary increase was 165% because folks were either unemployed or just underemployed. Like average salary when we were interviewing and accepting folks was like $20,000. And so we found all these people with the ability to do the work, and we were going to handhold them through the 6-month training to help get them in the door. So, yeah.
Wow. That's substantial. 165% increase. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like people had multiple jobs before and just like to sustain for their family. And our students were everywhere from, it was like 18 years old to 66 years old. We had such a range, and it was just people who wanted to learn and work. And, it was a great group of folks that we had. So
yeah, I love that because it really breaks through a lot of the stereotypes. There's definitely, and I'm sure you've noticed this, Penny, it's like white male security engineer, like
yeah,
that is an archetype. So,
yeah.
So, and all, like 20 to 30 year old. So it's very good to hear that there were like 60-year-old people that were still interested in learning and developing in this field, because that's very against the archetype.
And they have tons of knowledge and experience and like different things. And like, that's part of what would be great is if we could appreciate like some of the other knowledge that people bring. And not every role is for everybody, obviously, but we all have something we could bring to the table. And even like Kris, as you were saying, like you guys are very supportive too of me. As I say, I'm non-technical because I don't speak a certain language essentially when I say that, but I've done, user acceptance testing, and I've written business requirements. So I've been like tangential to the work, and it's all sort of familiar. But there's a lot that we could do to bring folks into the industry.
Yeah, it's actually a recurring topic here with a lot of our guests. We talk a lot about how the InfoSec community could learn a lot from adopting processes that already exist in businesses. For example, like AWS, when they were standing up their security processes, they, instead of trying to inject a new one, just incorporated it into their existing ticketing model, which they use for handling all of their normal day-to-day work. And I think that's kind of getting a little bit after what you're describing here, which is there's a lot of knowledge out there, and InfoSec being so young, we could really as a community learn to be better overall if we just kind of adopt best practices from more refined and more fleshed out sectors of business.
Yeah.
So on this podcast, we're going to talk everything about technical hiring. So we're going to get the lowdown on Penny and her experiences with technical hiring. We'll go through the Prelude technical hiring process and how Alex and myself have gone through that process. We'll talk about some of the experiences that Alex and myself have had through both being an interviewee and an interviewer. And so this podcast will dive deep into anything and everything technical hiring. So Penny, do you want to first start off and talk about your experience so far in the technical hiring process?
Yeah. So like I said, when I introduce myself, I do this on all calls, and I'm sort of coached not to do it, but I do it deliberately when I say, I'm not technical. And it's literally to just sort of set the stage that if you start using technical jargon, or you assume I understand certain concepts in like tech or networking or whatever it is, I'm not going to be able to follow you unless you give me the 2-minute primer on whatever the topic is that you want to discuss. And so I can definitely tell when I'm part of the interview process for technical candidates. They assume it's a checkbox or it's just a formality. They have to talk to an operations person, right? As we go through it. But what we've found, and one of the reasons why it's helpful to have me speak to candidates, is because it starts to proxy out how they would be working with the technical team or partners or customers, for example. Just because if you can't explain something simply, then A, you probably don't understand it very well. Or B, maybe you're not empathetic to the other person and they don't exactly speak the same language or use exactly the same terms or have the same background as you. And so in order to, work with people, you have to be able to adjust, right? And make sure they're following you and you can have a conversation. And so that's a big part of why it's helpful to have me to talk to folks. Initially, I was talking to people very early on in our interview process. And I would sort of tap the rest of the team and say, hey, heads up, these are like a few things that I didn't get a good understanding of this project when they explained it to me. I didn't feel like they could go deep enough or whatever concept they were talking about. So maybe dig in. And now it's just sort of the gut check at the end, just to see if they're sort of hand waving over examples and whatnot. And I guess the best way I could explain it, I was trying to get some good terms on this, but if a technical person is talking to another technical person, when you use a word or you bring up a concept, if you use the word and use it correctly in a sentence, you'll assume that they know what you're like. As the interviewer, if you guys are talking to somebody, it's assumed that they know what they're talking about, right? They use it and you just sort of move past it. But I will dig in and I'll ask well, what does that very basic term mean? And how do you apply it? And is that like this other thing over here? And give me a real world analogy. And that's how I sort of go through the experience with them. And so it's really helpful if they sort of stumble or I have to ask them the same thing 3 times essentially, and they're not getting the fact that I'm not getting them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a preview to, okay, they seem to only be able to work with people who already know that, right? And so if we're looking for somebody to do customer success work and sort of train somebody on a new concept or a new tool, that's not as helpful, right? If you can't sort of adjust to the other person's perspective. And so almost just to be on the nose, I almost want to flip to another language to literally give you the experience of what it's like if somebody's just speaking in jargon. like an mo piskati merikes foreske como storotao que te toka talavenis the burumana dulepsumemasi, right? So like literally like to speak Greek to you, like you're not going to get what I'm saying. And so some people are also not very good at sort of understanding when the other person is not following. So it's a big communication item too. And so that's where I start to see, and you guys have probably experienced it in work, like you're super smart, you're working with other smart people, but there's just like a disconnect, or you can't quite collaborate on the project, or I'm sure you have like actual technical examples of this. But I've done now 2 decades of like this, have had this experience of interviewing people or just working with people or vetting vendors or whatever it is. And so I've sort of fine-tuned my gut sense of people. It's that first impression, right?
Yeah.
It's like, like we were just like missing each other, like, and you see it come through later through the work. And so it's just been really helpful for me to try to speak to somebody and see if they can adjust and not use their usual jargon. They don't sort of sit back and explain the thing the same way they always have. And also, if you can adjust it, like you guys have worked with me, I use analogies a lot because I need some common language, right, to interact with you. And so if you can't follow my analogy, or at least help me clarify it or refine it, and potentially through the conversation call back to it and just help build on it, that also starts to proxy if somebody can learn quickly and if they're curious. And like, if you can only think in the way that you're accustomed to thinking, again, it affects the work and how you work with other people. So like all these things, like unfortunately, I still have the experience of people, showing up to the interview and sort of thinking like, all right, I'll check this box. And it's like, but you're not realizing, it's a waste of your time too, if that's how you approach anything. But it's disrespectful because like you should want to explain and be a good steward. Like that's another element, right? Like if you're not the type of person who wants to teach other people, that's another element that probably won't work very well on a team, right? Either for people you're collaborating with internally, or again, customers or other people you have to work with. So they're all like hints of how somebody would be as a teammate. And so hopefully that was enough rambling to give a sense of,
that's
what
great.
I look for. And
that's great. And I like you're talking about like sussing out that stuff. I can recall several times where you're like, I'm pretty sure this person is bullshitting. Definitely big on this. And it's stuff like that that is very important, especially the customer service side, because all our security engineers here are also our customer service. So you can't just be a good engineer. You have to be able to empathize. You have to be able to communicate with the customer. And that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah. And speak to them in just another language or try to explain it in some other way. I learn from like very different tools. And I love to just sort of consume random things because it, makes you smarter and expands your thinking, right? And so I was listening to Terrence Tao's masterclass. So I was super excited when that came out, and math is fun and I love all of it. And so, he was explaining like a very basic game of essentially like 2 people picking from the digits 1 through 9, and whoever like in taking turns, and whoever gets to 15 first wins, right? So it sounds very simple and we can all understand that, but you also don't quite know how to play, and you might have to wrap your head around it or try it a few times. But then, through the masterclass, he sort of showed if you apply it or like set it up in a different way, like a familiar game, as in tic-tac-toe. We've all played tic-tac-toe. We know what that is. So if you think of, a 3x3 box of tic-tac-toe and you arrange all the digits 1 through 9 in a way that each row and column and diagonal sum to 15, you're just playing tic-tac-toe. So it's like a slightly different perspective, and you don't necessarily have to understand the fundamentals of how it all works, but like you can start to engage in it. And it's like, okay, I can play this game with you. And then we can sort of broaden out. But people who will do that work to translate something for you or give it to you in, like, from a different perspective is really helpful. And I'll say, like we were doing tech talks here at work, right? Where we just sort of share knowledge. And I mean, I think Alex was on the spot every single time to sort of teach the group about something. And you probably recall, every time I have questions. I'm very good at asking questions. And so I remember there are times where, you talked about, I think one of them was around like, doing like attribution and hashing and like all the different things that like reassigning IPs, like all these things. And I was like, okay, so I don't exactly know all of these, like how it all works, but I likened it to something in the real world. And you being you, of course, were like, oh yeah, actually that does happen with missiles. And like this happens, like you probably don't remember, but you went on and explained it and then could work with me like through that example, which is super helpful, right? Because I'm not going to be able to, in 2 minutes, learn everything there is to know about file hashing and whatnot. But I got the concept enough that we could then talk in a sort of middle ground world. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson for people in general in this InfoSec community to be working towards at all times. Because I think something that you probably have also encountered is and you've mentioned it earlier, the InfoSec community isn't necessarily meeting people halfway when it comes to conversing and sharing language. And I think we as a community could get better by trying to like help the business side more and use more of their verbiage, as opposed to, like you were saying, just kind of speak in our elite speak numbers, beep boops.
We got to step out of the basement.
Different experience that everybody will bring, right? It's like some of it is process, some of it is just like risk, like all the operational things around every project or product that we're looking to bring. There's other stuff to factor in, and that's why we need the whole team to get to participate. So.
What processes in like technical hiring processes have you seen or been part of in other companies that you thought were very good?
I actually haven't been. So this is my most technical, I guess, work. Otherwise, I've had the opportunity to interview people who I'd be partnering with at other companies. So I guess it's like similar, just to see if, they understood. Like I would always represent the business, what we were looking to do, if they were a good partner to bring on to develop whatever the work was.
So more generically then, like can you talk about some interview like strategies or processes that you found very good that aren't technology related that maybe we could learn from and implement?
Honestly, I just have conversations with people. When the interview feels like question and answer, it's usually very bad. If it feels conversational, and I almost don't even care what topic we dig into. Like if we can have a back and forth and somebody can go beyond surface level, like that's just really good. The folks who have 20 different topics that they've just learned about and dug into and are happy to give me sort of sound bites on each one, tend to not do very well because they just have the sound bites and they can't explain further. So honestly, it's just digging in or asking follow-up questions, I guess. Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton more, but yeah. And I will say the folks who don't do sort of homework in advance, I will say I found a lot of people sort of just blast out their resume or have as many interviews as they can, thinking, top of funnel will get them, the best job in the end. I mean, I would just recommend like take a little bit more ownership and go for the jobs you want and like actually look into the company, actually look into the people you'd be working with and see if you'd want to be there. And just do a little more prep there so that we can, like another common language is if you're talking about our product, oh, I downloaded it, I checked it out and I have some questions and what's your approach on this? And that's another common language like we can speak. If you've read some of our blog posts, for example, I can talk to you about that.
People tend to forget the fact that if you're not only just interviewing for the job, but you're also interviewing that if you want to be there or not.
Yeah. And you want to be with people who will challenge you. Otherwise, you'll get super bored, and you won't be challenged, and the work won't be interesting, and it's a total miss. So
yeah, and Actually, I just thought of a really good example within our company of kind of everything we've been talking about. We have Stefan. So Stefan was an intern for us, and he is a mechanical engineer out of Virginia Tech. And he just kind of on a whim was like, I want to go try and learn cybersecurity. And he applied to our company, and he did a phenomenal job picking stuff up. And he had a mechanical engineering background, and we actually hired him full time after his internship because he did a great job and he showed that interest and aptitude, and he just wanted to get better. So I think that's kind of a good encapsulation of your point, Penny.
Yeah. And we had the environment to be willing to teach him, right? Like you have to take a shot on somebody who, shows the initiative. So
absolutely. So yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about how we are doing or how we're approaching technical hiring here at Prelude. And we already kind of talked a little bit about Stefan and how he came in as an intern. So we do have our intern program, and for our interview process, what we're trying to avoid is like a lot of the downsides of the bigger companies. Like I've interviewed at Amazon, and it's 7 interviews, each an hour long, and 2 on the phone, and then 5 like with 5 different people all on the same day, and there's a lot. And then you have others that are like multi-hour in-person interviews. So like our process is a little different. It's usually like a quick 15-minute meet and greet, talk about our company and our mission. And usually that's with like David or Spencer. And then from there, we actually do have like one technical interview. Kris, you want to talk about it? Because you actually got to sit in on our first actual like tech interview.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to even necessarily even call it an interview, because it's not like the interview process that you probably go through at a technical company mostly today. I think there is some notion that technical hiring is broken, and I think that we're trying to kind of get away from it and do something different. And our technical sort of way we do the interview is that we kind of set you into a situation where you work with us, right? So like you're given a task just like you would on a normal day here at the company, and we help you work through that task. So, when we went to do the interview for Bart, like that was me, it was Lewis and Bart, and it was just like a normal day, right? He had a task that he wanted he needed to accomplish, and we were there to help him accomplish that. So it's about working with, like, not just getting an understanding if this person is technical enough to do this job, but it's also, can I work with this person and can they work with me, right? Like, and getting that feel, which in a lot of technical interviews, that just doesn't happen. It's like, you get such a wide range, but like, even going through like the, security, like boutiques where it's just, you're standing at the whiteboard and they're asking you to do binary on a whiteboard. Like
I would not get hired there.
Like that happens, and it's awful. But we like, it's almost like taking all the experiences that we've all had that were like, that was awful, I don't want to do that, and making it a better process. So
yeah, I've actually done an interview where you have to prepare several hours of like ahead of time, and you have to come with a presentation ready, and you have to have like something to talk about and show that you've done like that. I think, in my opinion, that's kind of disrespectful of people's time to a certain extent. Like you're not really paying people to interview for your company, so they're already taking time out of their lives to interview for your company. And like you said earlier, it's about interviewing the company as much as the company is interviewing you. So I really like that ours is like, you're going to show up for your 70 minutes, 80 minutes, however long it is. And you're working with us to see if we can suss out, like, are you a good partner to work on our team? But we're trying to minimize the amount of time we're taking out of your life. Right.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, even at the end, like we were totally cool with, what Bart had made for his his interview process to even push that as a community repo thing. So
yeah, we did. We ended up, that's pretty cool too. Like the output of the interview went literally directly to our open source repository and was available to our customer base, which is like, that's pretty cool. Like you get to contribute to open source as part of your interview process. So like you're also building your resume a little bit. So we kind of touched on this area earlier. Maybe this was probably a good area for us to dig on the state of technical hiring. So Kris, you said you think it's kind of broken. Penny, I'm actually curious from your outside perspective, like what your views on the technical hiring process are, and do you think it's broken, or like do you think it works? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can just speak from my experience here. I think we've gotten to a good place because we balance it, right? It's the co-working session essentially, and then, a few conversations with the team. I'll say when we were doing the Prelude Institute, just seeing what the students went through on the interview process, it felt a lot like tests to them. So as you were describing, like whiteboarding and whatnot. And so when we were sort of running through that experience and doing interviewing for them, I just remember thinking, I guess this is the best way that they can see if somebody has hands-on experience, if they can explain something or, answer a question on the fly. But yeah, that's obviously not the ideal, because especially if you can simply, answer the question, doesn't necessarily mean you can apply the knowledge. That's why I love what you guys do with the co-working session, or what I try to do through just conversation and explaining something if we can get there. But I like where we're going with it. So
yeah. And one of the other things I like about our company in general is we iterate a lot on stuff. Like nobody's afraid to say things are broken and that we need to adjust them. So yeah, it's taken us time. Like we didn't start with this process by any means, but it definitely has evolved to this, and it's been working for us. And it's been like, we've had good feedback on it so far.
Yeah.
I feel like we've taken out a lot of the things, the pain points of technical hiring. We've taken that out and extracted it and said, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. Like no one wants to go up on a whiteboard and like in front of people and do things. Like you're always going to forget things. And it's a nerve-wracking experience for the person doing it, but then also for the person who's just sitting there, like who's watching that person. They've gone through it before and they know, and there's like, this is awful. And
it's also it's totally unrealistic. Like how, like I really don't like the interviews where they make you memorize stuff. Like that's just not realistic.
The green coding handbook, or the what was it? The coding hiring handbook or whatever, that's green. Everybody knows what that is.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, you've never seen it?
No.
It's literally it's like a 600 page, 700 page book, and it's nothing about, like, all it is it's hiring questions from Apple, Google, Amazon, Apple, and then doing all the rememorization of all the algorithms that you need to know, all the like technical questions that they'll ask you. And it's basically just doing like the hiring process so that you can remember it, so that when you go into the hiring, you can just kind of just like go for it.
Well, really what they need to be testing is, if you, assuming you have that knowledge, how do you apply it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what,
Or all the leak code stuff that people do. Like if you go on Reddit and like you go to like CS hiring, like the amount of people that just hate leak code because that's the only way that they feel that they can get into the FANG type environment. And it's just awful. It's like there's way better things that you could be doing. And there's like, go do projects, right? Like if you want to show something on your resume, you don't have something, you're just coming out of college, you're in college right now, like go do like projects, right? Go do personal projects and go have fun doing that. And that should be enough to apply to the jobs that you want to get into and do those things. You shouldn't be going through leak code and hoping that you remember like Kirkland's Law and stuff like that, so that you can get further into the interview process. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm interested, Kris. What else do you think like is broken about the technical hiring process? We've already talked a little bit about the like rote memorization as opposed to implementation and practical application of knowledge.
So one thing that, we do here that I personally haven't, gone through my process of doing quite a few interviews from different sections is actually like going through that process of working with other people. Like nobody does that. If you like we have the situation where like you can work with somebody and you can understand like, am I going to be able to work with this person? Right. Like no one's going to have all the answers. Right. And so like, is this a good fit to be able to work with this person and vice versa? Like, can they work with me? And can we accomplish a job? That's not necessarily done in technical hiring today. And what ends up happening is that there's so much siloization that happens in tech where you end up working a lot by yourself, and where you communicate is like on Slack or on, whatever messaging site, and then like your code commits and that's it. And so it tends to be this siloed situation. And that's why you get like in these big FANG companies, a lot of siloization, like this team works only with this team.
One of the things we do here a lot, Penny, I don't know if you know this, but we do what we call pair programming. So if somebody's working a problem and they're like either stuck or they're just like not sure what they want to do, we'll partner up with somebody. And it might even be like somebody from platform with somebody from security, and we'll partner together, and then we'll work on the problem together and collaborate on the code. And we find that actually tends to like suss out, instead of having to do a bunch of iterations on a single set of code, it helps you like get a much better implementation first, and then you can iterate off of that later. And that kind of goes back to the philosophy of our hiring process is kind of driven by that way that we do pair programming and partner workflows.
That's great.
Penny, I actually have a question for you. So what are the differences in how we are approaching hiring the like technical side people and how we're approaching hiring the business side people? Or are there differences?
I'm trying to think if there are. I guess one of the things, big picture for me, is of course we look for what you've done before, but it's really hiring for potential. So what you'll be doing here and how you approach things, and if you are ever curious and constantly learning, and like all the things we were talking about of if you can collaborate and communicate and all of that. So it's more, for the person who like what they will do. And then otherwise, it's really just those same things. If you're a quick learner and if you can adapt and, communicate and listen and, work with different folks and challenge things in a constructive way, and bring some of your other knowledge. So I guess it's not so different in the same way that you do some co-working sessions. We'll work through a project, for example, in marketing or something else that we're doing, even if it's just to talk about how you would communicate something or target a specific audience or whatnot. So we try to do a similar exercise on other roles.
That makes sense. I mean, if it works, it works.
Yeah.
And that also kind of alludes to the greater thing that we talked about last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago with Robin, which is when you're hiring people, there's kind of like independent of industry, there are some baseline character traits that you're looking for. And if the process is targeting those traits as opposed to like a certain skill set in this particular industry, it kind of makes sense that they would align.
And if it just feels natural, right, to the whole, it shouldn't feel like this choppy interview process where now I talk to the next person and there's this Q&A session. If you're just sort of having ideas after the session too, and you're curious and you just want to keep chatting, that's just the best preview we have.
Cool. I think we're getting close to the hour mark. So Kris, do you want to take us out with the final question?
Yeah. So Penny, what security resource in the past year has really been, you found really helpful?
So I use Google basically a lot. So I have the benefit of our team, obviously. Like you guys help curate things for me. And I, follow certain people like Jen Easterly at CISA and whatnot, right? Some known entities who I can trust, what they're putting out there just to have a general sense. But what I try to do is I'll take whatever article and then I'll just Google from there. Like if I don't know a term or whatever it is. And what's nice is now things are more familiar to me. So like you start to realize how you, or at least I've gotten like a baseline knowledge of different topics. And so now I'm just literally Googling constantly. And I'll say I have the benefit of this team, like both of you in particular. If I ask a question, you won't just sort of give me a hand wavy or assuming I won't know the answer type of response of like, oh, I'm not even going to bother trying to explain it, but like you will give me other resources, which is really helpful. Of course, on YouTube, there's tons of things that I can pull up. There's one like a geek like learning thing and like a CS curriculum too that I've been following, but more for like baseline comp sci stuff. Yeah. So I just try to consume in general.
Google is my best friend.
This goes back to what I was saying about interviews, Penny. Like if I didn't have access to Google and Stack Overflow, like I probably wouldn't be able to do my job nearly as effectively.
Work is like an open book test. Like you don't have to memorize, right? Like, and know how to, like, once you do find a resource, how to gauge, okay, so is this a good one for me or not? Or where do I keep digging and whatnot? And so that's what I've refined a little bit.
Yeah. It actually kind of reminds me of a meme, or it's where somebody was asking like, why would I bother hiring a programmer when they're just copying off Stack Overflow anyways? It's like you're hiring because they know which code to copy off of Stack Overflow.
No, we just need that keyboard that's just the copy and paste. That's it.
Keyboard. Oh, man.
Yeah, but it's been great. Like working with you guys, the rest of the team. There are tons of learning here. So for just anybody anywhere, if you're trying to learn and get into the space, like find people who want to teach you and create just like a good culture and atmosphere. There are good folks out there. So like that's the best thing. And I have this favorite quote, which I'll share because I just absolutely love it. And it's indicative of the type of culture where at least I'm trying to help build here as we bring in different people and different learning and try to make something that will have real impact. And I don't exactly know who first said it. I got it off Gabriel Cardier's profile, but Google attributes it to Mitch Grego. And so it's when life gives you lemons, make orange juice and leave the world wondering how you did it. Ooh. So those are the people that I want to work with is those.
That's a great quote. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
So this concludes this week's episode of Overture, the Prelude Podcast. We'll be back this week on Friday for another episode. Overture is on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. If you like this podcast, please consider giving us a like and subscribe. We'll be back this week. Till then, Prelude out.